The latest English Pokémon Trading Card Game expansion, Paradox Rift, released on November 3rd, 2023, and with it came a lot of interesting new cards. While the set introduced a lot of new powerful Pokémon and trainer cards for standard play, we will be taking a closer look at the cards suitable for the format called Gym Leader Challenge. Gym Leader Challenge, also called GLC, is a format of the Pokémon Trading Card Game with specific deck construction rules. This is a singleton format, so only one of any card name can be present in the deck. This excludes basic energy cards, of which you may run as many of any color you want. This is also a monotype format, so only one color of Pokemon can be played in the deck. This means that a normal type Swablu, for example, cannot be played with a dragon type Altaria. Third, this is a non-rulebox format, so no card in the deck may have a rulebox. Radiant Pokemon, Pokemon GX, Pokemon EX, A-Spec Trainers, Prism Star cards. All of these cards have a rulebox and cannot be played in a GLC deck. Finally, this is an expanded format, so every set from the Black and White era up to the present day is legal, except for some exceptions. Of course, if you are playing in a non-official setting, feel free to change up the rules however you and your opponent see fit. If you and your opponent think it is more fun to have normal type Swablu and Dragon type Altaria in the same deck, then do so. You can see gymleaderchallenge.com/FAQ for a full explanation of the rules. For this set review, I won't be going over every new legal card. Instead, I'll go over all the ones that I see have potential and describe how the card may be used in the format. I'll provide general thoughts on what I think of the card, how strong the card is, and whether the card needs support. I'll compare the card with past cards, older versions with the same name, and other cards with similar abilities, attacks, and/or effects. Finally, I'll talk about what decks, old and new, could fit the card. I'll be going in set order, skipping most not fully evolved Pokemon, and I'll leave unviable Pokemon until the end. I'll give each one of those a comment. If you disagree with my opinion on any cards or think some good ones were left out, leave a comment. I'm always happy to hear your feedback and learn from my mistakes. With that, let's begin. Starting off, we have Pansage and Simisage. Pansage has the attack Call for Family, which is solid in grass decks, and Simisage has the attack Armthrust Needle, which is good against Pokemon with abilities. So Pokemon like Unfazed Fat Snorlax, Jumbo-sized Wailord, and many others will have trouble against Simisage. This attack is very similar to that of Ingot Swing Melmetal, which has seen competitive play in GLC. There's plenty of counterplay to Simisage, things like Boss's Orders, Guzma, Hex Maniac, and Escape Rope, among many others. These cards all can deal with Simisage very well. This is probably the best Simisage so far, and it's playable in damage prevention decks along with Blanket Weaver Leavanny and Drifting Dodge Jumpluff. Overall, this is a niche card, but it is playable. Crustle. Crustle has the attack Crag Bash, which allows it to take 100 less damage from attacks from evolution Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. This is good against Pokemon like Swirling Slice Gallade and Electrified Bolt Electivire, allowing Crustle to live one more turn. However, this applies no damage reduction against basic Pokemon, so Special Laser Necrozma, Amazing Shot Raikou, Hydro Splash Wishiwashi will all deal full damage to Crustle. Crustle also has plenty of counterplay, such as Boss's Orders, Guzma, and Escape Rope. This version of Crustle competes with Shell Armor Crustle, which has an ability that applies to all incoming damage. This version of Crustle is playable in damage prevention decks along with Blanket Weaver Leavanny. Overall, Crustle is niche but playable. Orbeetle. Orbeetle is outclassed by previous versions of itself, including Jamming Attachment Orbeetle and Bugs Radar Orbeetle. In general, the new Orbeetle is not worth playing over the other two. Nimble. This is not a fully evolved Pokemon, but it deserves special mention because it is incredibly playable. It has free retreat, it's fetchable with Level Ball, and it's better than past versions of Nimble for this reason. It will see immediate play in free retreat grass decks, such as the one published by Pellet in the Turkey Gym Discord. Toadscroll. Toadscroll has the ability Slime Mold Colony, an ability that counters hand recovery cards like Tulip, Clara, Rescue Carrier, Revitalizer, and many others that are relevant for GLC. It's different from the only past version of itself, which is primarily an attacker. This one is primarily a support Pokemon. Its main issue is that GLC decks are only 60 cards, so it competes with other support Pokemon for deck space, such as Swelling Toon, Kricketune, Sunshine Grace Grovyle, and several others. So overall, it is very niche, but if you have space for it, it could be worth running. Wo-Chen. Wo-Chen has 2 attacks that have good synergy together, although it is a little bit slow to set itself up. And it can be played in tanky grass decks along with Shining Genesect and Zarude. Overall, it is okay, but it requires time and support and therefore won't see play in most decks. Moving on to fire types, we have Magby. Magby has the attack Scorching Heater. During your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, even if it is knocked out, put 6 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. It also has free retreat, so this is a decent pivot that requires no energy for its attack. However, it is outclassed by Castform, which also has free retreat, and its attack is more useful generally in fire decks. I don't expect to see much play out of Magby, but it could be used here and there as a way to stall out for a turn. Moving on to Pansear and Semisear. Pansear has the attack Call for Family, which allows you to search the deck for a basic Pokemon and put it on the bench. This is a solid attack in fire because there are not that many bench setup attacks. The best one probably is Oricorio, and this one doesn't see much competitive play, so Pansear is a solid addition. Semisear has the attack Heat Tackle that does 190 damage, which is a very high number for the format. Since the attack has a high energy cost, this needs support from things like Burn Brightly Charizard, Magma Basin, Welder, and Blacksmith. Past versions of the card don't really compete with this one, so overall, this is a solid nuke attacker, and it might see scattered play. Volcanion. Volcanion is generally outclassed by previous versions of itself. Hydro Burn Volcanion does more damage, and Flare Starter Volcanion has better energy setup for its first attack and has a better second attack than the new version of Volcanion. So I don't expect to see much play out of this card. Iron Moth. Iron Moth has the ability Thermal Reactor, which is a solid ability that allows it to move fire energy from other Pokemon to itself. It also has okay damage output, but it does require some support. Cards like Wishful Baton and Experience Share can help keep energy in play so that Iron Moth's ability can activate. So overall, this is an okay mid-speed attacker that can see some play. Another fire attacker is Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu has Flarebringer as its first attack, which is okay energy acceleration, and its second attack, Mega Fire of Envy, is similar to Rally Back Entei. Rally Back Entei does see some competitive play, so I expect Chi-Yu to also be decent. Moving on to our water types. Kingdra is outclassed by 2 previous versions of itself. Seething Currents Kingdra is more disruptive, and Deep Sea Kingdra can keep more energy in play. The new Kingdra has a unique first attack, but it's not very consistent, and so I don't expect it to be played much over the other 2. Octillery. Octillery has the ability Suction Cup Draw, which allows you to draw 3 cards when you evolve it from hand. This is similar to High Speed Magnetric. This is generally outclassed by Abyssal Hand Octillery because Abyssal Hand Octillery allows you to draw up until you have 5 cards every turn, instead of just on evolution. So this card is generally outclassed. You might see it in some water control decks where the hand size is very large, but otherwise you probably won't see this over the other Octillery. Milotic. Milotic has the ability Lifeboat, which forces each player to put a basic Pokemon from their discard pile onto the bench. This combines Echoing Horn and Target Whistle, except that your opponent gets to choose which Pokemon they bring back. It's generally outclassed by Sparkling Ripple's Milotic, which gets any card from the discard pile, which is very good. You can get back the Echoing Horn in this case, or get back the Revive for whatever use case you need. If you really need both, I guess the new one is worth running, but it seems very niche and might only be playable in some spread decks. Palkia. Palkia has the attack Prize Count, which is a very fitting name. If you have more prize cards than your opponent, this attack does 80 more damage, so it can reach 160 damage total. This is a solid attack, and it's easy to set up with Raihan and any energy card that counts for 2 energy. Overall, though, I think other attackers may be more consistent with their damage. You don't have to play from behind with many other attacks, but for this one you do. So I think this one's kind of niche. We finally reached the third member of the monkey trio, Panpour and Simipour. Panpour has the call for family attack, but this one is not that good because it is outclassed by Hisuian Basculin. Simipour has the attack Liquid Lashing that does 50 damage and also does 30 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This is a good spread damage attack, and it compares well with other spread water attackers. You don't have to worry about past versions of this card, those ones serve different purposes. So overall, this is a solid card, and it can fit into spread water decks. Vanillix. Vanillix has the ability Frigid Room, where your opponent's Pokemon that have 40 HP or less remaining cannot attack. This is similar to, and better than, the effect of Panic Mask. Past versions of this card serve other purposes. Bitter Cold Vanillix can paralyze your opponent when it's in the active spot on a coin flip, and Slippery Souls Vanillix can act as an escape rope. Overall, this card has a very good ability, but it requires a spread deck that is built around the card to function. Something like Articuno with Blizzard Veil can prevent your opponent from using something like Boss or Guzma to target this Vanillix. Golisopod. Golisopod has the attack Powerful Cross that does 20 damage for each card in your opponent's hand. This is a cheap attack that only requires 1 energy, but it's not that reliable, and it competes with other versions of itself, like Pokemon Go Golisopod, with the first impression attack that does 110 damage if it is switched into the active spot that turn. Overall, the new Golisopod is niche and it won't see much play. Wugtrio. Wugtrio has the ability Suddenly Select, which allows you to grab 3 Pokemon Tool cards from the deck and put them into your hand when you evolve this Pokemon from your hand. However, it is severely outclassed by several other cards. Adventure Bag allows you to get 2 tool cards from the deck and put them into your hand as an item card. Shady Dealings Drizzile allows you to grab 1 trainer card from the deck and put it into your hand. So you could grab Adventure Bag, for example, to get 2 tool cards this way. And Drizzile is much more flexible in this regard. Finally, Guzma and Hala allows you to grab a tool card, a special energy, and a stadium. So it allows you to grab many more different types of cards than Wugtrio. So overall, outclassed. Veluza. Veluza has the ability Fillet Memento, which allows you to move up to 2 water energy cards from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon when it is knocked out in the active spot. This ability can save energy from going to the discard pile, and its attack is similar to attacks of other Pokemon that have seen success in competitive GLC. This version of Veluza is much better than any past version of Veluza. Overall, it's good and it fits into energy acceleration decks, such as ones with Excalibur, Super Cold. Next, we have Dondozo, which is kind of a meme, and it has the most right-aligned text I have ever seen on any card. It has the attack Supplemental Swallow Up. So you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic energy cards you find there to Dondozo. It's not very consistent unless you have lots of water energy cards or other basic energy cards in your deck. So you can make this work more consistently with something like Cryogonal with Element Chain, which allows you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and attach any number of basic energy cards to your Pokemon any way you like. You can also pair this with Celebrations Kyogre to do massive damage to the bench. So this card's kind of a meme, but it's kind of funny. You can make it work. Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle has the ability Hyper Blower. If this Pokemon is on your bench, you can switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench, and then discard Iron Bundle. This ability is similar to Whirlpool Suction Fione, except that Fione will put itself onto the bottom of your deck, whereas Iron Bundle must be discarded. Overall, Iron Bundle will be good. Fione has seen GLC success, so Iron Bundle could also see the same success. I think Fione might be a little bit better, just because you can use it multiple times and you don't have to recover Bundle, but I could see Bundle also being good. Next we have Champao. Champao is not very good, It has an energy acceleration attack, and its second attack is pretty average for an attacker. Water has plenty of energy acceleration already, so you don't really need Champow's first attack. So overall, I don't expect to see much play out of Champow. Moving on to Lightning type Pokemon, we have Elekid. Elekid has free retreat and it requires no energy for its attack. However, this Pokemon will be fairly niche because there are other free retreat lightning Pokemon that serve other purposes, such as Flying Flip Tapu Koko that does bench damage, and another version of Tapu Koko that can draw cards. Next we have Minun. Minun has the ability Bloody Pulse. If you have +1 play, your opponent attaches energy from their hand, then you put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. This pairs well with Arctozolt, which has a very similar ability, so you can put 4 damage counters for every energy attachment from hand your opponent does. However, you can run into some issues with bench space, so I think overall, this may fit into some general or spread lightning decks, but it is a little bit niche. Zebstrika. The new Zebstrika card is generally outclassed by previous versions of Zebstrika and Dynamotor effects in Lightning. Its first attack provides energy acceleration, but you could also use Dynamotor Flaffy and Dynamotor Electric for this purpose without using your attack for the turn. Sprint Zebstrika allows you to discard your hand and draw 4 cards, and this provides a lot of consistency in Lightning decks. Overall, the new Zebstrika is mostly an attacker, but you have other attackers in Lightning, so I would rather just play those other attackers and then play the consistent Zebstrika and Dynamotor cards. Zekrom. Zekrom is a solid attacker. Its Raging Thunder attack does 130 damage, and it also does 40 damage of recoil to one of your benched Pokemon. This is similar to Zekrom of the past. There's a past Zekrom card that has the Wild Shock attack. It does 60 damage to itself, 130 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and your opponent's active Pokemon is also paralyzed. The new Zekrom card is a little bit more flexible about where you can place that damage, so overall I think it can fit in some existing Lightning decks with energy acceleration. Moving on to Psychic types, we have Xatu. Xatu has the ability Clairvoyant Sense. Once per turn, you may attach a basic Psychic Energy card from your hand to one of your benched Pokemon. If you do, draw 2 cards. This ability is amazing because it provides draw support and energy acceleration with one ability. This is the best Xatu that has ever been printed. This pairs well with Psychic Recharge Malamar, which attaches Psychic Energy cards from the discard pile to your benched Pokemon. Overall, you can create entirely new decks out of Xatu and Malamar because you can attach 2 extra energy per turn. You can run many more attackers in the Psychic type. So I'm excited to see what people will build in the Psychic type now. One attacker that can take advantage of Xatu and Malamar support is Latios. Latios has the attack Luster Purge that does 180 damage for 3 energy, but you have to discard 3 energy from this Pokemon after you use it. This second attack is strong, and with the energy acceleration of Xatu and Malamar, you can get Latios running in 1 turn. This is the best general Latios that has been printed. And it competes with other psychic attackers like Crown Zenith Mewtwo with the Limit Break attack. Overall, Latios is very solid and it can fit into existing decks. Another attacker that could take advantage of Xatu and Malamar support is Deoxys, but I believe this Deoxys is a little bit outclassed by past versions of itself. There's the Fusion Strike Deoxys that can do 160 damage with Photon Boost if it has a Fusion Strike energy attached. You can use Shining Mew to get 2 energy cards of any type, including Special Energy, and attach them to Deoxys. So Fusion Strike energy and probably double colors energy, you can get Deoxys running easily. I think Deoxys has a place in some decks if you are not running the Shining Mew engine, but if you are, then it is a little bit outclassed. Gourgeist. Gourgeist is different from other psychic Pokemon printed in this set. It has the ability Startling Pumpkin. If this Pokemon is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, discard 2 random cards from your opponent's hand. This is a good ability, and you can make your opponent discard more cards by pairing this with Cursed Duster or Spirit Mask. Past versions of Gourgeist serve other purposes. You can use this Gourgeist for specific decks such as Psychic Control. You can pair this with Read the Stars Gothitelle to control exactly what your opponent has in their hand at any time. Overall, this is a little bit niche, but if Psychic Control ever becomes good, this Gourgeist card also can be good. Espathra. Espathra has the ability Stance. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may prevent all damage and effects of attacks from your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon until the end of your opponent's next turn. This ability is very good, but the attack Glittering Eyes is okay when Tulip is in the discard, and it's not so good when Tulip is otherwise not. This ability is very similar to the past card Sound Veil Crobat, and you can actually pair them together to create a new deck. Overall, I think this can fit in some comeback Psychic decks to provide some invulnerability for a turn. Next we have Tinkaton. Tinkaton is generally outclassed by previous versions of itself. The past version of Tinkaton, Gathering Materials in Tinkaton, has the ability to discard a card from your hand to draw 3 cards each turn. The draw power of this past Tinkaton outweighs the usefulness of the new Tinkaton. To round out the new Psychic types, we have Screamtail, which has the attack Roaring Scream. This attack does 20 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each damage counter on this one. So the attack is decent, but it requires some support. The easiest way to get this attack going is to use something like Guzma and Hala to grab a stadium like Gatejaw Bog or Calamitous Snowy Mountain, and then also grab the card Rainbow Energy. So you can play Calamitous Snowy Mountain in Screamtail, and then place the Rainbow Energy on Screamtail. This will put 3 total damage counters on Screamtail, and then you can be attacking the bench for 60 damage. Overall, this is a little bit niche and kind of difficult to set up. It doesn't do enough damage. Hopefully we see more support for something like this in the future. Moving on to fighting types, we have Groudon. Groudon has the attack Magma Purge. Discard up to 4 energy from your Pokemon. This attack does 60 damage for each card you discarded in this way. This attack can do up to 240 damage, but it does need some energy acceleration support. Colossal, with the Tar Generator ability, can support Groudon best because it can attach a fire energy and fighting energy from the discard pile to your Pokemon any way you like once per turn. Groudon competes with other fighting attackers like Terrakion, but Groudon fills its own niche because it can deal a lot of damage with a single attack. Overall, I think this card fits into Colossal decks. Next we have Garganacl. Garganacl has the ability Energizing Rock Salt. Once per turn, you may attach a basic fighting energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. If you do, heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. If you run 3 Retreat Nacli, the entire line of Garganacl, Naclstack, and Nacli can be retrievable using Heavy Ball. The ability is amazing, but it competes with past versions of itself. Specifically, Blessed Salt Garganacl, which during Pokemon Checkup, you heal 20 damage from each of your Pokemon. Past Garganacl is a slightly better healer than the new version of Garganacl. However, the new version of Garganacl fills its own niche because it provides energy acceleration. Overall, I think this could actually fit alongside Colossal because many Colossal decks already run Rare Candy to get the Colossal out faster. You can also then run Garganacl using the same Rare Candy to be able to Rare Candy into Garganacl from Nacli. You can also run Garganacl by itself in some tanky fighting decks because of the healing it provides. And here comes another meme card. We have Cloth. Cloth has the attack Unhinged Scissors. If this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, this attack does 160 more damage. The first attack is unhinged, is the best way to put it. Overall, it is a meme card, but it does work with a couple existing cards. First one being Spicy Seasoned Curry. This can burn your active Pokemon, so you can burn Cloth using Spicy Seasoned Curry. You can also use Yellhorn to confuse your Cloth, but this is a little bit less reliable because then you only have a 50% success rate using Cloth on your attack. But if you're just trying to have fun, run this card. It's so cool. Next we have Flamigo. Flamigo has the attack Combat Beak, which has 20, and it also does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. This attack is okay, and it's similar to some past cards that have seen some play. Magearna specifically has the attack Wind Up Cannon that does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and it has 10 base damage. Overall, though, I don't expect to see this Flamigo in competitive play. The Magearna card is primarily played because of its first attack to be able to shuffle your hand and draw 6 cards. Keldeo, which has a similar attack, has not seen any play. I don't expect Flamigo to see play either. Slitherwing. Slitherwing has the attack Burning Turbulence that does 120 damage, and it also does 90 damage of recoil to itself, and your opponent's active Pokemon is burned. This could be an okay standalone attacker in fighting, and you can pair it with Raihan to get more consistent damage off. Ting-Lu. Ting-Lu has the attack Arrogant Impact that does 220 damage if this Pokemon has less than 4 damage counters on it, otherwise it does nothing. It also has a decent first attack, Sandbringer, that allows it to attach 2 basic fighting energy cards from the discard pile to one of your Pokemon. Overall, though, I think this is niche. It's a little bit slow, and it needs healing and damage reduction support to even be able to attack. Moving on to Dark types, we have Crobat. Crobat has the attack Echoing Madness. Choose item cards or supporter cards. During your opponent's next turn, they can't play any of the chosen cards from their hands. This acts as supporter or item lock, depending on what you need. It's similar to Luxio, Disconnect, and Venomoth, Perplexing Powder. This card competes with past versions of itself, but overall, it fills its own niche, because this Crobat fits into control decks, unlike the other Crobat cards. Next up, we have Absol. Absol has 2 decent attacks. The first one is Draw Awareness. Draw Awareness, you can discard any number of cards from your hand until you have 4 or fewer, then draw cards until you have 5. The second attack, Enhanced Blade, deals 20 damage, and if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached, this attack does 60 more damage. You can set this up easily using Guzman Hala to get a tool card and some 2 energy card, like Double Colorless Energy. This competes with other fast attackers like Spiritomb and Hoopa, and it also competes with past versions of itself. Overall, this is a decent attacker, and I expect to see some of this in general dark decks that run Double Colorless Energy. Yveltal. Yveltal is outclassed by one version of itself and other fast attackers. The new Yveltal card has the attack Crosscut, which does 30 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, does 60 more damage. However, it has a 2 retreat cost. One past version of Yveltal has a 0 retreat cost, so it acts as a pivot and as an attacker. Other dark attackers can attack using 1 energy attachment, and some of them even attack with 0 energy attachment. Yveltal, the new one, requires 2 energy for its attack, so it's harder to attack with it. Its second attack does not come up as much because it requires more investment. So overall, this card is a little bit outclassed by some other cards in Dark. Next up, we have Thievul with the Rob and Run ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may have your opponent reveal their hand, you choose 2 energy cards you find there, and shuffle them into your opponent's deck. Past versions of Thievul have different abilities, they serve other purposes. So overall, this new Thievul card serves its own unique role. You can use it in some control decks, but I don't expect to see it otherwise. It's not that good. Now, one of my favorite Pokemon, Morpeko. Morpeko has the ability In a Hungry Hurry. If this Pokemon has no energy attached, it has no retreat cost. It also has the attack Energizer Wheel. Move 2 dark energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. This Pokemon is a good pivot, and it keeps energy in play, and it pairs well with Red Banquet Guzzlord because the dark energy that gets moved from Morpeko can be moved to Guzzlord to satisfy the 2 dark and the Red Banquet cost. There have been several Morpeko dark cards in the past, but I think this Morpeko card has potential and will see some play. Next, we have Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet has the ability Toxic Powder. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, you may make both active Pokemon poisoned. This ability is similar to some other Pokemon in the past, including Poisonous Puddle Garbodor. Overall, this card fits into poison decks, but it doesn't really fit into much else. Now we move on to our Metal-type Pokemon, starting with Jirachi. The new Jirachi card is outclassed by two previous versions of itself. Dreamy Revelation Jirachi, when it is in the active spot, allows you to look at the top two cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand. You put the other one back on top of your deck. Stellar Wish Jirachi, when it's in the active position, you may look at the top 5 cards of your deck, reveal a trainer card you find there, and put it in your hand, shuffle the other cards back into your deck, and this Pokemon is now asleep. These two Jirachi cards are both amazing compared to the new one, which only provides bench protection against basic Pokemon that place damage counters. Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn has the ability Exoskeleton, which allows it to take 30 less damage from attacks. It also has the attack Spinning Needles for 50 damage, but the next time you use Spinning Needles, it does 100 more damage. The ability and attack are both okay, and overall, we might see this Pokemon get played in damage reduction metal decks alongside Aegislash with Big Shield and tool cards like Metal Core Barrier. Speaking of Aegislash, there's a new Aegislash in this set. However, the ability of this Aegislash is not relevant for GLC. There are two other versions of Aegislash that are better than the new one. We have Big Shield Aegislash, which reduces damage for all of your Pokemon by 30 from your opponent's attacks. The other Aegislash has Royal Guard, which reduces damage to just Aegislash by 40. Next, we have Zacian. Zacian has some slow energy acceleration to the bench. It competes with a lot of past versions of itself, but overall, this is going to be a niche card. None of the other Zacian cards really see much play, and I don't really expect this one to either. Next, we have the only playable dragon type from this set, Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri has the attack survival strategy. Search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. You may switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. This has good synergy with Slimy Room Goodra because that ability is only usable when that Pokemon is in the active spot, so you can switch Tatsugiri to the bench to be able to get Goodra into the active position. You can also use Salaman's Dragon Wind to be able to boss up one of your opponent's Pokemon so that you can buy an extra turn to be able to use Tatsugiri to search out 2 cards you need for the next turn. However, I think Tatsugiri is kind of a niche card right now because the double attachment means that you might need to use your double dragon energy or your counter energy just to be able to use Tatsugiri, and that's a valuable resource that you could be using for another attacker instead of using it on a support Pokemon like Tatsugiri. So I don't expect to see much play from this card yet. Continuing with the colorless Pokemon from the set, we have Porygon Z. The new Porygon Z card is outclassed by several Porygon Z cards from the past. There is Crazy Code Porygon Z. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a special energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. That is an amazing ability, but there's also other Porygon Z cards like Bug Transmission Porygon Z that can confuse the opponent's active Pokemon, and Initialize Porygon Z that can devolve your opponent's Pokemon. The new Porygon Z card has the ability Buggy Turbo. Once during your turn, you may flip a coin. If heads, attach up to 4 basic energy cards from your discard pile to this Pokemon. If tails, discard an energy from this Pokemon. The fact that you need a coin flip to use this ability to get 4 basic energy onto this Pokemon is unreliable, to say the least. Also, a lot of colorless decks don't use basic energy, so you have to use this Porygon Z in a basic energy deck in the first place. Right now, there aren't too many good colorless decks that use basic energy, except for perhaps the Welder deck, using Slacking and some other cards. So this Porygon Z is not that good. I would rather just use Crazy Code Porygon Z. Next, we have Miltank. Miltank has the attack Lively Tackle. If this Pokemon is healed during this turn, this attack does 90 more damage. It has 60 damage base, so it can do 150 damage total for 2 colorless energy. This is a solid attacker, and it has a very specific combo that I think could be relevant. This involves Porygon Z, Rainbow Energy, and Medical Energy, the new card from this set. Porygon Z with Crazy Code, as often as you like during your turn, you can attach a special energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So you can use this ability to first attach Rainbow Energy to Miltank to deal 1 damage counter to Miltank. Then you attach a Medical Energy to heal that 10 damage off. This way, you can get the healing effect for the turn, so Lively Tackle can do 150 damage. So you'll probably see this in Porygon Z decks. Some other decks might be able to play it, but it doesn't seem that reliable yet. Spinda. Spinda has the ability Tingle's Feet. If this Pokemon is confused and is damaged by an attack, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. It also has an attack, Teetering Steps, that can make itself confused. You can combo this with the ability so that you pivot from one Pokemon into Spinda, you attack with Spinda to deal 100 damage, and then you make itself confused, and then your opponent needs to flip a coin to be able to do damage to the Spinda. Of course, there's much counterplay to this, including Boss's Orders, Guzma, Escape Rope, but if they don't have any of those options, then they might be forced to take that 50-50. This is similar to Dragapult with the Infiltrator ability and Jumpluff with the Drifting Dodge ability. Overall, you may see this played in Porygon Z decks which have good enough energy acceleration to be able to satisfy the attack requirement of Spinda. Cyclizar. Cyclizar is generally outclassed by past versions of itself. There's a past version of Cyclizar with 0 retreat and it has similar damage numbers. The new Cyclizar is not all that great, to be honest. Its attack can do at most 140 damage, and it requires 3 energy. So you need to play this in a deck with good energy acceleration in the first place. The old Cyclizar already wasn't really being played in colorless decks, so I don't really expect to see the new one played either. Next is a card that I'm excited about, that is Iron Jugulis. Iron Jugulis has the attack Homing Headbutt. This attack does 50 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon that have any damage counters on them. The second attack is Baryon Beam for 150 damage. If this Pokemon has a future Booster Energy capsule attached, this attack can be used for 3 colorless instead of the 5 base. These are 2 solid attacks. The second one can be used to do a lot of damage, and the first one can be used to spread a lot of damage to try to take multiple knockouts. You can combine this with the damage from Shining Arceus, or Exploud, or Fan Rotom. There are several good colorless attackers you can combine to make a decent colorless spread deck. So overall, I think this might be a good card for colorless spread decks. That's it for the Pokemon. So now we'll be moving on to the trainer cards. Starting off, we have Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, which is a tool card that says, the ancient Pokemon this card is attached to gets plus 60 HP, recovers from all special conditions, and can't be affected by any special conditions. This is a better Bravia Charm, and similar to a card called Sparkling Robe, but it only applies to ancient Pokemon. It combines those 2 effects. Overall, this is going to be a niche card because for any one type, there's at most 1 ancient Pokemon for which this card applies to. Next is a card that I've mentioned in this video already, Cursed Duster. It is a Pokemon tool that says, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, discard a random card from your opponent's hand. You can use Delinquent, Mars, and Spirit Mask to further reduce your opponent's hand size. So I can see some limited use of Cursed Duster in control decks. Next, we have the Pokemon tool Defiance Vest. If you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, the Pokemon this card is attached to takes 40 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. You can combine this with Blanket Weaver Leavanny. Your grass Pokemon take 40 less damage from your opponent's attacks. You can also combine this with Big Shield Aegislash. All of your Pokemon take 30 less damage from your opponent's attacks. So with Defiance Vest, that becomes 80 damage on the Pokemon it is attached to, or 70 damage in the case of Big Shield. Overall, I think this card will see play in those 2 archetypes. Next is a card that is being raved about in standard play. That is Earthen Vessel. You can use this card only if you discard another card from your hand, search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. This is similar to a card called Professor's Letter and Capacious Bucket for water decks. Overall, I think Earthen Vessel is an amazing card. The discard part of the effect is not even a bad thing in some cases. You have cards like Abyssal Hand Octillery and Industrious Incisors by Barrel that draw more if you have fewer cards in your hand. Therefore, I think Earthen Vessel has a place in several decks in the meta, and so I think it'll see immediate play. We have the counterpart to the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, that is the Future Booster Energy Capsule. The future Pokemon this card is attached to has no retreat cost, and the attacks it uses do 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So basically, this combines the effect of Floatstone and Muscle Band into one card, but it only applies to future Pokemon. There are only 3 future Pokemon this applies to for GLC. So overall, this will be a niche card. Adding 20 damage is good, but it only applies to a very select few Pokemon right now. A super interesting card that came out of this set is Luxurious Cape. If the Pokemon this card is attached to doesn't have a rule box, it gets plus 100 HP, and if it's knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, that player takes 1 more prize card. If you have damage reduction and healing support in your deck, this card can help save your Pokemon for an additional turn, maybe an additional 2 turns. And overall, I think it's good for those archetypes. It will see immediate play in metal decks, I think, because there's a lot of damage reduction and healing in metal already. You can use Max Potion to heal damage from one of your Pokemon and discard the energy from that Pokemon. If you can move your energy around, it's not so bad, and you heal all the damage. So you might be taking 200 damage and healing all of that damage off using Max Potion. Or you use something like Acerola to put the entire Pokemon and all attached cards into your hands. So you can pick up the Luxurious Cape and put it on a different Pokemon afterward. Mela. Mela can only be used if any of your Pokemon are knocked out during your opponent's last turn. You can attach a basic Fire Energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. If you do, you draw it until you have 6 cards in hand. The Energy Acceleration with the draw makes this card decent, and it compares to Raihan. Raihan is very similar, and Teammates is less similar because you don't get the energy attachment, but you get to search out more cards. Overall, I think Mela is very good for fire decks, and it doesn't really seem to fit into other decks right now. Most decks don't run fire energy, except for maybe fighting. Regardless, Mela is very good for the fire deck. Parasol Lady. Parasol Lady has a great special illustration rare, but its effect is not as good. You shuffle your hand into the deck, then draw 4 cards. If you go second and it's your first turn, draw 8 cards instead. The fact that you can only use the second part of the effect when you're going second and when it's only your first turn makes it very situational. It is generally outclassed by Cynthia, which is shuffle your hand, draw 6, and Colress, which is shuffle your hand, draw for the number of benched Pokemon in play. Professor Sada's Vitality. Choose up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon and attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to each of them. If you attach any energy in this way, draw 3 cards. The Energy Acceleration combined with the draw makes this very similar to a past card called Welder. However, for each type, there's only 1 ancient Pokemon in that type. So when you choose up to 2, it really means just choose 1 of your ancient Pokemon, because you will only have at most 1 ancient Pokemon. For the ancient Pokemon that do exist right now, some of them can use this card effectively, so there is a niche for this card at the moment, and it won't be that good just because it's not applicable to that many Pokemon. We have the counterpart to Professor Sada, and that is Professor Turo's Scenario. Put 1 of your Pokemon in play into your hand. This card is almost exactly like AZ, almost word for word, and it fulfills the same exact niche. AZ hasn't seen that much competitive play, so I don't expect to see that much competitive play out of Professor Turo's Scenario either, but there are some use cases for this card. Next, we have Elite Four member Rika. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck and put 2 of them into your hand. Shuffle the other cards and put them on the bottom of your deck. This seems okay, but it's just generally worse than all of the draw 3 supporters. It has a niche in some decks that really need to search out for a particular card, but you could be using Bill's Analysis or Kindler instead to be able to search out those cards. So overall, I think Rika will be niche and it won't see much play. Next, we have the first of 4 technical machines introduced in this set. Technical Machine Blindside. This attack does 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. This pairs very well with Pokemon that can attack twice or take multiple prizes, such as Ancient Trait Torchic and Ancient Trait Articuno. Overall, I think this card is amazing and it creates completely new deck archetypes. Technical Machine Devolution is a little bit different. Devolve each of your opponent's evolved Pokemon by putting the highest stage evolution card on it into your opponent's hand. This makes it easier to knock out evolution Pokemon if you already have damage on that Pokemon. Overall, I think this is a good card for spread decks, such as spread psychic decks and spread water decks. On the flip side, we have Technical Machine Evolution. Choose up to 2 of your benched Pokemon. For each of those Pokemon, search your deck for a card that evolves from that Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. Then shuffle your deck. This allows you to set up evolution Pokemon faster, and overall, I think this is amazing and works in most decks. Finally, we have the last technical machine, Turbo Energize. Turbo Energize is an attack that searches your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attaches them to your benched Pokemon any way you like. This pairs well with Pokemon that can attack twice, like the aforementioned Ancient Trait Torchic. Similar Pokemon attack and accelerate energy in the same way like Volcanion with Flare Starter, but this technical machine has a place because it allows other Pokemon to accelerate energy that normally don't do so. Overall, I think it has a niche, this card, and it could be useful in fire decks that require lots of fire energy in play. Next, we have the item card Techno Radar. You can use this card only if you discard another card from your hand, search your deck for up to 2 future Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. Each type has at most 1 legal future Pokemon, so this card is not very useful. You could just use like Quick Ball or Nest Ball to be able to grab that Pokemon instead. So overall, niche card, it won't see much play yet. The last relevant trainer card introduced in this set is Tulip. Put up to 4 in any combination of Psychic Pokemon and basic Psychic Energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. This is good Pokemon and energy recovery, and it's very flexible as a card too. This is similar to Nessa and Clara. Overall, I think this card will be immediately playable in several Psychic decks, including Lost Zone Sableye. This set only introduced 1 special energy, and that is Medical Energy. When you attach this card from your hand to one of your Pokemon, heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. I've already explained one combination you can do with Miltank, but you can also play this card in some tankier decks, such as Grass or Fighting or Metal. I think it could be useful, so there's a niche for this card. At this point, we've covered all the viable cards from the set. I've also made a list here of all the generally unviable cards. So we have like Masquerain, which doesn't do too much. Mantike, it's a free retreat, but it doesn't really do much besides be that free retreat. Galvantula, which does some spread damage, but it doesn't do enough spread damage. Oricorio, which is a little bit slow. Onyx, which doesn't really do much. Gliscor, it does some damage, but I'd rather have other fighting attackers. Mienshao, a little bit weak as an attacker. Minior, it has an interesting ability, but it doesn't really do enough damage. Liepard, you need to run it in some kind of tanky dark deck, so it doesn't quite work. Garbodor, this one, there's just not enough tool cards in most dark decks to be able to run its attack very well. Lowkicks, this one, there's no Dark Nimble card, so you just can't run this card right now. You could run I guess you could run the Phantom Transformation, Zoroark to be able to get into Lowkicks, but I don't think it's worth transforming into Lowkicks just for the attack. There's Steelix, which there's no way to create the Steelix in Metal decks right now. Just all the Onyx cards are fighting type. You have Durant, which combines well with other Durant, but doesn't really do much else besides that. You have Orthworm, which you need to reach a very small deck size in order to be able to use, so it's very much a late game card. It's not very useful before then. Ambipom, it just doesn't do enough damage. Exploud, which is good. On the first turn it evolves, but after that it doesn't really do too much. It might be able to do some damage, but it's not worth the investment most of the time. Then we have the supporter card, Larry. If you flip heads, it's a decent card, but it's very unreliable, and I wouldn't usually run a card like this. I'd rather have something more consistent. Norman, you can draw 2 cards. There's no Pokemon EX in the format, so this card's not very useful. Snorlax Doll, it's not very good unless you have it in your opening hand, and that doesn't happen often enough. So you could see this card sometimes, but it's usually not worth the deck slot because after the first turn, after the first look at your hand, it becomes a useless card in the deck. Chantal is unreliable. It's either a boss or a switch on a coin flip, and you'd rather just have something more consistent. Maybe you would just rather have boss. You wouldn't run this alongside boss and Guzma just because that's how unreliable it is. Finally, Rourke. It's draw 2 cards, put a basic energy card from your discard pile into your hand. This one could actually be decent, but it's generally outclassed by better draw supporters, and you could just run a recovery card like Energy Retrieval or Superior Energy Retrieval to get that energy back instead. And that completes the set review for GLC of Paradox Rift. Thanks for watching. This is the first time I've done a set review for GLC, so it would be nice if you had any feedback, if you had any comments, leave those down. I'm always happy to hear about it. I always want to improve the content. I like GLC. Goodbye.